I'll tell you what my first impressions were. Quite charming. Half-timbered houses, window boxes with petunias and bright geraniums blooming on every sill. Little girls with ribbons in their hair, little boys with aprons stitched in bright colors. If there was poverty, I confess I didn't see it. It was heaven. And everywhere you went, music.
Nora Wall, an American, lived in Hitler's Germany from 1934 to 1938. For most Germans, these were good years, a time of growing prosperity. Hitler's Nazis had promised national revival, and they boasted enormous popular support.
I was to stay in Bad Godesberg in Western Germany. The day that I arrived, the Führer himself was in town, Adolf Hitler. There were swastika flags hanging out of every window, crowds 3, 4, 5 thick lining the roads, and this bubbling enthusiasm. It was contagious. One woman turned to me, a perfect stranger, and said, "He is my mother and my father. He keeps me safe from all harm."
Germany in these years was gripped in a cult of the Führer, the leader. The Nazis urged Germans to put their differences aside, to rally behind Hitler, trusting in the glorious future of their country, and the fact that Hitler could do no wrong.
It was terribly exciting, like a festival. And the welcome that I got was warm, embracing. I don't know what I was expecting, quite, but certainly not such generosity. I was to stay in lodgings used by a professor I knew, a professor of music. And the couple who owned the place were young and enthusiastic, typical, it seemed to me, of this new Germany. Yes, lovely house.
Oh, thank you. Come through. The town's full. It's the best tourist season we've had in years. It's all you foreigners. Curious to see if us Germans are as bad as they say, huh?
You have got a room for me, though.
Oh, yes. We got your letter.
Hello, I'm Frau Trutz. You must call me Ursula. And you've met my husband, Eric. Professor, Frau Wall is here.
It's not the biggest of rooms, I'm afraid.
Oh, I don't need much.
But you can see right across the square.
Hello, Frau Wall.
And tonight, there is going to be a festival for the Führer. There'll be singing and dancing. And you will have a splendid view.
You're too kind.
No, never too kind. We want you to enjoy your stay.
Nora's description of life in Germany, published in 1939, is full of everyday accounts of love for the Führer. She found people endlessly keen to explain how grateful they felt.
It's like Germany is a ship that was broken on the rocks. And by gift of God in Hitler, we have a leader who can repair and steer that ship. Eric?
Do you worship him?
Worship is too much.
Well, some people do. I heard the other day at Berchtesgaden, outside Hitler's house, these old women actually ate the gravel where he'd stood.
It's like they're under a spell.
Yes, but you don't know what it was like before Hitler. We have every reason to be thankful.
Before Hitler, Germany had been deep in economic depression. Before Hitler, unemployment had stood at 7 million. Before Hitler, Germany was a democracy, but too many parties had split the vote, so governments were weak and unable to solve the crisis. Hitler offered dictatorship, all power in the hands of one man. And Germany was quick to accept Hitler's terms.
Unemployment's absurd. People say we are civilized, and yet millions of people are out of work. What is that? That's sick. No one should be denied the right to work. And neither should anyone who can work be allowed to be lazy.
Work and bread. These are the Führer's blessings.
Putting Germany back to work was Hitler's first and most pressing problem. But because he was all-powerful, he had the clout to carry out large-scale work programs, like building autobahns, motorways to link the nation together. By 1935, unemployment had fallen to just 2 million. By 1939, it was gone.
My landlord, Eric, worked for the German Labor Front. He had business all around Germany, and once I went with him to see what they had achieved. And it was remarkable. We saw labor camps, not for wage earners, but for young people, 18, 19 years old, to teach them the value of work, to get their hands hardened. You saw them marching along with their spades like guns, or singing as they dug ditches, reclaimed land. If you spoke to them, sometimes you felt they resented being there, but not often. There was, I think, a pleasure involved. Eric would say,
"You must understand, work shouldn't be just earning a wage and going home. That's drudgery. We believe there's a beauty in labor. You do a job well, and it gives you happiness."
it was like the Nazis were shaking people into feeling good about what they did. You had to work. You had no choice. You were organized. You were there for the state to use, and they would milk you for your labor, no question. But then, at the end of the day, they said, "Now, see what we have achieved." And it was pretty impressive.
The work program was vast and triumphal. Hitler had promised a Germany reborn. He said he was building for a state to last for 1,000 years. He'd rebuild Berlin on a magnificent scale. There'd be an assembly hall in every city, a swimming bath in every village, a house and garden and car for every worker. Much of this was pure fantasy, but enough was achieved to pump German pride.
Confidence. That's what it was. Everywhere. And a great sense of Germanness. National costumes, parades, music. And even if you found it all a bit funny, there was so much good. You could leave your door unlocked. You could leave your washing on the line without it being stolen. No one dropped litter. Young people offered you their seats on the trams. And yet, I didn't believe it. Not 100%. Or at least I questioned it. In America, I had heard so much bad of Nazi Germany. Violence, brutality. I wondered if I was seeing, if I was being allowed to see, the whole picture.
Tens of thousands of books were cast into the flames around which Hitler's brown-shirted Nazis stood with fixed bayonets.
Newsreels like this fueled the image many foreigners held of the Nazis' rise to power.
No such act of barbaric vandalism had been recorded in modern history. As the leaping flames of the Nazi bonfires illumined the night, the crowd about danced and hurrahed in an ecstasy of mad emotion, while stories of wanton beatings and bullyings in the darkened streets added to the terror.
Such pictures were seen around the world. Hardly surprising Nora was suspicious.
It's all you foreigners. Curious to see if we Germans are as bad as they say, huh?
The truth, Nora had to find out for herself.
Early in my stay, I was reading the German papers. Problems all over the world. Unrest in France, misery in Russia, a shipping strike back home in California. In Germany, everything's rosy. A small squabble in the Nazi party, but it only gets 1 or 2 paragraphs. And then I picked up the British paper. As an American, I was still allowed foreign news. And lo and behold, Germany's the headline.
Hitler Russia's brown shirt revolt. No pity for Hitler's friends, shot, he says, for treason. Hitler's chief of staff, executed.
It was the night of the long knives, June 30th, 1934. Hitler had butchered 400 top brown shirts, the very men who helped him grab power in the first place. Just a mockery of lawful government, and the German papers so carefully censored. I was so shocked. I wanted to speak to someone, so I launched into this spiel at Professor Moritz, the musician who kept the lodgings upstairs. And his reaction, I will never forget. This extraordinary phrase he came out with. Still, sprich durch die Blume.
Shh, speak through a flower.
I didn't know what he meant. And then it dawned on me. Speak through a flower. Say only good things. Don't criticize.
If you must talk of the Führer, then it must be because you wish to praise him. Or else do not speak at all.
He blocked up the keyhole with putty. He stuffed a pillow along the base of the door. He pulled out the cables of the telephone.
These days in Germany, you cannot be too careful.
And I think it was only then that I realized how terrified some people were.
Let me tell you a story. Maybe you'll learn more what it feels like to live in this Germany now. Another week I go to a shop. I say to the shopkeeper, how's business? Just small talk. Stupid thing to say. His wife goes, business? It's bad. It's non-existent. We don't notice, but another customer's come in. Yesterday I go back to the shop. I say to the shopkeeper, how's your wife? He says, they've taken her away for re-education. Somebody heard her grumbling. She said business was bad, so they turned her in. Maybe he thought it was me. In Germany these days, you trust no one.
Those that didn't fit in Hitler's Germany had reason to fear. The Nazis allowed no opposition. Political parties that once had stood against them were banned. Their leaders left the country or stayed to face harassment or arrest. It was all legal, but only because Hitler, now, was the law.
We Nazis have conquered Germany, but to restore this country completely we need discipline and we need order. So I will deal ruthlessly with anyone who would stop me. I won't have ignorant, misled, insignificant people shot, but those really responsible will in all cases be crushed to earth.
In March '33, the first concentration camps appeared. Brutal prisons run by Heinrich Himmler's black-shirted SS. Here, German citizens were sent for any act of political opposition. Maybe just writing an anti-Nazi slogan on a wall, or keeping a banned book, or telling a joke at the expense of some party official. The secret police, the notorious Gestapo, carried out the arrests. And working hand in hand with them, the tens of thousands of ordinary Germans committed, or just spiteful enough to tell on their neighbors.
You don't dare say anything out loud against the Nazis. Say in a streetcar, you don't give your opinion to anyone you don't know. You never do anything that's forbidden. If people say Heil Hitler, you say Heil Hitler.
I knew of people who turned in their neighbors. I knew of people who turned in their neighbors convinced they were doing the right thing. It's a system. Everyone's stuck in the Nazi web. It's quite devilish because no one trusts one another.
In 1941, in the war, I was in hospital. In the bed beside me, there was a mother with a newborn baby. And foolishly she said, "More cannon fodder." She never even made it home. They arrested her in the hospital.
From Professor Moritz, Nora learned the darker side of recent German history. How German Jews were being victimized. How trade unions had been banned. How, despite the boom in the economy, with no one to argue their case, workers' take-home pay had fallen. How the professions were being stripped of non-Nazis, civil servants, doctors, teachers, judges, losing their jobs unless they towed the Nazi line. Many refused. One such was Professor Moritz himself.
Oh, I thought you knew. He's not allowed to give lectures anymore. He has a few private students, that's all.
He never told me.
Yes, well. And day by day, his private students desert him. Well, he should have retired long ago. And he's got money. He can still pay the rent.
But he was one of the best. Why would they sack him?
It isn't usual to question acts of government here. It's close to treason.
But didn't anyone protest? His friends at the university?
They organized a petition. They took it to the ministry, where they were told that presenting a petition was a serious act. At which point all but 2 had the sense to leave.
And the 2 that stayed?
They were beaten senseless. One was a fine organist at one of our biggest churches. I've heard that his hands are ruined.
So much for my cheerful, festive Germany. It made me so angry. I remember standing there on the stairwell, my hand clutching the banister, and I just wanted to scream at her. Stop it! Stop it! Stop the broadcasts, halt the parades, tear down the banners all red like blood, stop the chanting, and please, please treat this insane man who thinks he's Führer in some asylum somewhere. But she just fixed me with this infinitely reasonable smile and said,
You mustn't judge ours a bad government. We need to be ruled hard until things are sorted out. We'd have gone communist if the Nazis hadn't saved us. And the Führer is good and fine to all who willingly obey. And he knows that we must be united in order to regain our place among the strong nations of the world.
To regain our place among the strong nations of the world. Hitler's seductive promise. The Versailles Treaty had left Germany weak. If Germany rearmed, the Allies could invade. Hitler had called their bluff. He'd pulled out of disarmament talks. He'd brought back army training for all German men. And in '36, he'd marched into the Rhineland, a buffer with France where no German troops had been allowed since 1990.
The Gazette presents the first actual pictures to reach this country of the German troop movements, which have caused the biggest political sensation of recent times.
Where does it all lead? To a new war or to a shorter peace?
Hitler talked of peace often. It wasn't a contradiction. He said he was arming Germany not for war, but defense. Like the hedgehog, Germany would be secure but threaten no one. Many European leaders found this reasonable. Ambassadors were sent to shake Hitler's hand. Meanwhile, Germany stockpiled arms, built submarine bases, and trained bombers in secret in Russia and Spain.
He wants war. Why can't they see that? He thinks 1918 is unfinished business. So childish. It would be laughable if it weren't so tragic.
And are there many who think like you?
No. I think most would cheer him all the way. But I'll tell you something. Each time he takes a gamble, announcing national service, marching into the Rhineland, beforehand, each time there were arrests, pacifists and so on, taken to the camps. Everyone knows someone who knows someone who's disappeared. Just a little terror. But would they do this if they truly believed we all supported them?
But Hitler did have the support of the great majority. Maybe not for war, not at first, but Hitler convinced the German people war would make Germany strong. And after so many humiliations, he'd fed a deep desire for revenge. By 1938, the year Nora Wall left for England, Germany was on a war footing.
They say that their army is the most powerful ever seen. I don't think they're bragging. When Germans do something, they do it well. They have 1 million men trained to fight, more in reserve, and every resource in Germany at their disposal. Arms factories, shipyards working day and night, miners on 14-hour shifts. They're cutting down the park railings, rationing the butter. Whipped cream, white bread, personal freedom sacrificed.
So, Nora.
Nora.
Prost.
Oh, go on then, one more, why not?
I'm going to tell them how good Germany is.
I hope you have a good journey. It's been great having you here.
You've been lovely. It's been really, really lovely having you.
Thank you.
To Nora.
Nora.
A wonderful guest.
Oh. To Hitler.
The day that I left, it was the Fuhrer's birthday, April 20th, 1938. Parades in every town, just like the day I arrived. Flags, cheering crowds, but this time too, tanks and armored trucks. I was a bit the worse for wear. The night before, they had sent me off, Eric and Ursula, toasting me, toasting Germany, toasting Hitler. I stayed very quiet. I don't think they noticed.
It's as if the whole working strength of every man, woman and child is power concentrated in the Führer's fist. And with that, he carves our future. How a people forces its way upwards is unimportant, but the goal is magnificent.
And you know, I don't think it was the drink that made their faces glow with such radiance.